Welcome to Strictly Creative, where we speak to artists, creators, dreamers, researchers, and supporters of all things creative. This is the final interview in our Endless Becoming series, a dynamic exhibition at the Ottawa Art Gallery in downtown Ottawa near the Rideau Centre. In two separate previous episodes, the podcast's host, Garmamie, interviewed two of the 11 artists featured in the exhibition, Leigha Stiles and Armand Diansambu. If you haven't heard those Strictly Creative conversations yet, go back and listen everywhere you get your podcasts. Endless Becomings, Explorations in Contemporary Art, explores ideas like identity, memory, connection, and continuous transformation. The exhibition runs until March 15th, 2026, so if you haven't gone yet, hurry up and go see it. In this final conversation, Garmamie speaks with curator Elisa Jiménez Robles about how the exhibition was shaped from idea to opening night, how pieces were selected, how decisions get made, how the show becomes one conversation in one space, and the behind-the-scenes work visitors rarely see. Here's curator Elisa Jiménez Robles.
Yeah, so as part of my Master of Arts in Contemporary Art Theory at Ottawa, I was given the opportunity to co-curate this exhibition alongside my classmate, Shems Benmosbah. It was a year-long internship, and so we had many tasks divided between the two of us, but I mostly took part in talking to the artists and finding more about their process and the ideas behind their artworks and condensating all of that into the curatorial text and the descriptive text for the artworks. I also designed the layout of the exhibition with the help of the amazing team at the OEG. This couldn't have been done without them. What else? I also consulted in terms of the design and marketing options for putting the exhibition out there. Again, with the help of the OEG team. So I dipped my toes in a bit of everything regarding the exhibition, but mostly getting the ideas for how to describe such an amazing and diverse group of artists that are part of this show.
Very interesting. I do have some questions in regard to your work, your partner Shem, because as you mentioned, you were co-curators on this project. Can you give us a bit more background on the graduate program and your overall experience in Ottawa? Because currently you're in Mexico. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I came back after finishing my degree at the University of Ottawa. I came back in September, but I spent a year in Ottawa studying this Master of Arts in Contemporary Art Theory. It's, as the name itself describes, it's mostly based in art history and art theory, focused on modern contemporary art. It's a survey of what artists have been doing for the past few decades and what they're doing right now. But there's an opportunity for students of this program to do an internship in some form of artistic institution. It can be a gallery, a museum, or even as research assistants. And in our case, we had 2 spots available at the OEG, and so my partner and I, Shems Benmosbah, took this chance to co-curate this exhibition. So it was a year-long work of gathering with the team at the OEG and talking with the artists and reading their thesis papers. Some of them had already been graduated by the time that we started our internship because the exhibition comprises the last 2 cohorts of the MFA. So we worked alongside the MFA students. The cohorts from 2024 and 2025 comprise the artists that are part of this exhibition.
Curious to know why would someone consider graduate studies in art history? Explain it to people who may not have any understanding on that subject matter, and why you and others and many others decide to study art history at the graduate level. I'm just curious.
Right. So starting with my personal view on things, back here in Mexico, my undergrad was studies in cultural management, so it's a bit more of the administrative part of culture and arts. But I always wanted to focus on art itself. I did have a few art history classes in my undergrad studies, sorry, but um, ever since I took those classes, I wanted to become an art curator. And so a few years after graduating from that, I started looking for programs that went into, yes, a theoretical part of art, but also a bit of putting it into practice in museums or in galleries. And so I chose this program because it does give us a survey of what artists are doing, but it also gave us a chance to um, put our hands into more directly working with artists and coming up with an exhibition itself. So that was mostly what interested me from the program, to be given the chance to put myself out there as a curator. And why would people be interested in studying a program like this? Well, I found that contemporary art especially is hard to understand for a lot of people that haven't had the context or the interest in art before, because it does tend to be a little complicated, a little abstract in terms of how it's done or the ideas behind it. So a program like this gives people a chance to understand it better and see the amount of work and effort that it takes to do an artwork that at first glance it might seem as something very simple, but it actually has a lot of thought behind it.
How has your experience studying, as you mentioned, art management to now, art history and to putting on and curating an exhibit like this, how has it changed your perspective or your relationship to art? When you go to a museum now, are you more critical? What do you look for? How has it shaped your worldview, I guess is what I'm asking, as someone who's invested into the creative?
Right. So, from a very early age, I was always interested in art, but I saw it in the most basic, foundational way. Some things I didn't understand. So, studying arts management, cultural management, and then specifically art history and delving deep into what contemporary art is has definitely enriched my perspective in terms of giving me new ways to look at art, to think about it. And I definitely am more critical whenever I go to an art gallery or museum. And when I look at things, I take longer time to appreciate how something is done, to read the text. I sometimes, every time I visit an exhibition, I take thousands of pictures, and then I go back home, and a few days later, I look back at them and I read the text again. And sometimes I go into the artist websites to find out more about the process and the ideas behind the things that they create, because um, sometimes the exhibition shows some things that can be easily interpreted. Sometimes it gives you the chance to make your own interpretations, but I like to go even deeper, um, and keep like a mental portfolio of things that are going to inspire me in the future, possibly, or connections that I can maybe make later when I want to come up with ideas for exhibitions or to write about, because I also like writing.
Fascinating. Now, there's a lot to discuss. Obviously, here we're speaking about endless becoming explorations in contemporary art, which is at the Spencerville Gallery, which is at the Ottawa Arts Gallery, level 3, third floor, and it's running until March 15th. I've told many people to go check it out. I've been there many a times myself, as I've shared before, to check it out. It's in simple terms, what is this show about, and what do you want visitors to leave thinking about? What is the expected outcome from someone who you know shows up and experiences all this art?
Yes. So
Sorry, I know it's a big
this
question. 'Cause
explanation, no, that's fine. It's a big question, but it's an important one to answer because I do want people to keep visiting it and to keep finding out more uh, new ways to look at it because I've been there myself a few times that I've been there myself. But I curated it, I co-curated it, and then I every time I visit it, I find something different. So this show brings together 11 visionary artists who are shaping the future of contemporary art because they are continually pushing the boundaries or going beyond the trends of what art is, of what people think art is. Um, so their individual practices are very different, but we found in getting to know more about them that they are all united by a desire to keep exploring new ways of creating and communicating their perspectives, their ideas, and their worldviews. And so the common thread that unites these artists is how their practices, ideas, and works are in constant transformation. So many of the works themselves in that are exhibited in the show um, have changing properties. You can go one day and visit and see something, and then you go a few weeks or a few months later, and you're gonna see that some of them have changed, or that you yourself have changed, and you're looking at them differently. So that's mostly what we want people to do to come back if possible and see what has changed in terms of the work themselves, but also how their perspective of the works and the ideas that they read about, that they looked at, have changed as well.
For you personally, which one is there one piece of art that haunts you, or you keep thinking about, or I guess which, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I know it's not fair. There's 11 artists and they have all put, they're all showcasing incredible work respectfully. But they're all very different and they're all telling unique stories. Which one piece of art to you really grabbed you?
Oh, that is indeed a hard question.
You don't have to answer it now. We can come
Yeah.
back to it later if you want. I know it's probably not fair to ask, but I mean, yeah, like we can skip it for now, and we'll come back to it. I'm curious. So you mentioned obviously you're co-curating this with Shem. Tell us a bit about how you work together. Earlier on, you mentioned you divided tasks. How was that decision made? How do you curate, pardon me, how do you like collaborate together, and what was the dynamic like between the both of you?
Well, right at the beginning, we divided the artists amongst ourselves. It's a big group. 11 artists it might not sound like a lot, but it is for a show like this. So we divided them as best we could, and we conducted studio visits with them, each with our own small group of artists. We got to know them better. We read their thesis papers. We took the time to choose the works that they had previously exhibited in their final thesis defense at the University of Ottawa, and trying to make connections with the pieces that each of us had chosen from our little group. The dynamic was sometimes a little complicated because we did most mostly we worked from home. I mean, we did see each other almost every day at school, but we have very conflicting agendas because of school and work and other things. But we tried to meet at least once a week with our supervisors at the OAG, who were Rebecca Bastiano and Megan Ho, who are amazing curators, by the way, and they helped us a lot along the way of curating this exhibition. We tried to meet once a week with our supervisors, but um, amongst ourselves too, to continually keep talking about what we were doing each week, how things were advancing, what new findings we we had when talking to the artists, and then organizing the things that had to fall into place for the exhibition to come to a reality. Um, she is an amazing writer and thinker as well. So the text that she wrote, I had to edit just because the agenda was a little complicated, but I didn't want to change any of the words that she said because she's, again, a very smart person, and I couldn't have done it without her because her ideas also enriched the way that I looked at the artworks and the artists that we were working with. Um, so yes, in terms of time and organizing it, it was a bit tricky, but it all came together really nicely in the end. And I think our ideas complemented each other really nicely.
Were you all friends before, or did you become friends in the process? Was there a personal connection before, or was it strictly creative on a professional level?
We became friends during the process because I had never been in Canada before. It was my first time, and so I met her when the MA program began. We both chose this internship, and we got to know each other better all throughout this process, and we became really good friends.
Right on. What's the weather like? Where in Mexico are you, if you don't mind me asking? And what's the weather like today?
I'm in Guadalajara city, which is in the state of Jalisco. And right now it is a little chilly, but it does not compare to the cold of Canada that you guys are having over there right now. If like it feels like early autumn in Canada. If
Okay.
it's the coldest it's ever gonna get here. It's what is it right now? Now mm, 8 degrees AC,
Wow.
8 degrees
Wow.
Celsius. Which is
Okay. That's the
chilly, but
coldest?
it's nice. For me, it's really nice.
That's the coldest.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
in the that's the coldest during the day. It does get to maybe 2 or 3 degrees at night, but I mean, honestly, compared to the winter that I lived in Canada, it's nothing. It's
Yeah.
really nice for me. And after living there for a year and living through that winter, I sometimes don't even wear a coat or anything in this cold. 'Cause it's like fake cold for me now. I
Cold.
yeah, it does not compare.
What do people think when they see you without a coat? Are they like, "Oh my God, she's lost her mind"? What do they say?
Yes, I have found that this is a phenomenon of people from Mexico who go to Canada and live there for a while and experience the cold there. We come back and we sometimes underestimate how cold it gets here, but honestly, it's nothing. And people see us and are like, "Aren't you cold? Are you crazy? Why aren't you wearing at least a light sweater?" But
Right.
I don't know. The thermostat in our bodies is forever changed after visiting Canada for a winter.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's cold today. I mean, last night it was really cold. I believe it was almost like -20 with the windshield factor, and oh boy,
Oh boy.
yeah, it was brutal. It was you can't unfortunately we can't curate the weather here, you know. We have no control over it. But I wanted to know in terms of the selection of the works for the show, as you mentioned, there's 11 artists, and you did half of them, I would imagine. What were you looking for when you chose the pieces? What was your did you have a criteria? How did you go about selecting the works, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. Well, mostly, it was based on the artworks that they had already shown in their final thesis defense. So it's not that there weren't too many options to choose from, but we did take a look at what they presented when they finished their MFAs. But we also wanted to see if, especially for the ones that had been graduated for a year or almost a year, when we started, if they had been doing something new in their practice. So it was a combination of things that they already had that were part of the central process of their MFA and how their practice evolved during their studies, but also things that they had worked after learning everything that they learned and everything that they absorbed throughout the program. Um, so it was maybe a small or kind of easy selection to make, but still there were things that fit better than others in that we prioritized, for example, words that had a certain kind of dialogue in terms of ideas behind them with other work that we had chosen. So it's not necessarily choosing them because of how they were going to look together, rather if there were ideas that they shared amongst them. So always trying to find a common thread between all of them.
That's really interesting because there's so many there's a lot happening there in terms of different generations, different disciplines, different cultural perspectives, right? And you guys wanted to create a certain dialogue. How did you make all these different, because it's about transformation and especially on the cultural side, it's interesting how and in terms of experiences, how the range of to use the word diversity was certainly there, and I mean that in many ways, creatively, visually, people's experiences, talking about them. But how did you guys, I guess what I'm asking is, how did you make it feel like one conversation in one space, in one large space? When I was walking through there, I felt like I was teleporting to a different universe, because it was all these, different art pieces, but they're all within a certain theme of transformation. So the question is, how did you manage to keep the conversation all uh, feel like one big dialogue, I guess?
So one of the courses that we took in our MA program was one that focused on the philosopher Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari, who was his partner in a lot of the work that they did together. Which is funny because ever since taking that course, we felt that Deleuze's ideas kept appearing throughout our process and everything that we read, everything that we looked at. And we could not let go of him, of his ideas. And it was a constant voice that guided the process of uniting all of these artists. And so this is mostly what gave origin to the common thread in the dialogue of all the artists together and all their works, as well as the idea behind the name of the exhibition, because it's the way in which Deleuze and Guattari describe the concept of becoming. So for them, becoming is not about resemblance or identity, but about relation and transformation. It's an active process that exists in between stable forms. And they also assert that there is no end point or final form in this process of becoming. It's actually an endless process of transformation. So that's why we named it an endless. I mean, the original full title would be An Endless Desire Towards Becoming, because the artists are connected by this endless desire of continually transforming their ideas or perspectives. And so all of the works have a focus on transformation in terms of sometimes some of them physically transform throughout the exhibition process, and some of them in terms of ideas keep changing. So, for example, some artworks that we put together have to do with an archival process because they talk about ideas or even objects that have been part of the artist's family or life, and they become part of the artwork itself. Some have similarities in terms of the materials used. Some of them are working with some of the artists come from the same places. For example, we had two Iranian artists, but they had different ideas. We didn't necessarily put them together, but of course there is eventually a connection between them in terms of resistance, in resisting oppression, in ideas such as those. So it was certainly a hard task to find a common thread between all of the artists, because it can't be simplified in terms of how they look, like the colors that they use or the materials that they use, or like the very simple ideas that you can look at, but rather again, this constant voice, influencing voice of Deleuze and becoming and constant transformation, and then the desire to keep bettering themselves as artists is what brought everything together.
Okay, what was, sorry, can you tell us, can you spell the name of these researchers from this class you took, this particular course? Just their last
Yes,
names.
Deleuze is Deleuze,
Okay.
Deleuze, and Guattari is Guattari.
Okay. And you mentioned the original title. You mean the original title of the exhibit itself would have been when you were referencing the,
I say it's the yeah. I say it's the original title because it's a phrase I found in an exhibition catalog I was researching for another thing I was doing, but it talked about Deleuze and this idea of becoming, but the full phrase is an endless desire towards becoming. But we shortened it to endless becomings because it's a little less poetic, a little less abstract and complicated. But we still took the chance to describe what this means in the text that we wrote, describing the exhibition and the work themselves.
yeah, this is really cool. I would imagine, as a commoner like myself, like as someone who attends exhibits, like I obviously I enjoy reading what's being provided there because it informs me, it provides context as to what I'm looking at, background information on the artists, and a bunch of other stuff. I think for people who don't have a formal arts training background, I think we value this information because it educates us on what we're looking at. And in your case here, as a curator, what would you say? What's the hardest part of shaping the theme of continuous transformation into something people can actually see and understand? Because it's such a continuous transformation, and this endless desire towards becoming is beautiful, right? When you think about it poetically, it has so much meaning. Philosophically, it's magical. When I think of when I think of that, I'm taking I'm taken elsewhere, right? So how do you shape that experience for people? More importantly, for them to actually understand what they're looking at using that sort of terminology.
So I think the hardest part is writing the text in a way that is accessible for most readers, for most visitors. I myself have always defended the idea of writing accessibly because even before doing all of my studies, my undergraduate and my graduate studies, I used to be conflicted when visiting an art gallery an art museum, especially if it was contemporary art. How how complicated the texts are written.
Mm.
They're sometimes too poetic, too
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 academic, too dense.
mm, too academic. Yeah, the terminology is hard to understand for someone that um hasn't studied art or about art.
Right.
So I have always fought for the texts to be easy to understand. I mean, it's hard to do because sometimes um curators want to be poetic and decorate their words a lot. And it sounds pretty, but it's not always easy to understand, not for everyone. So
Mhm.
um we did make a huge effort to maintain our curatorial voice and style in terms of how we write and how we express ourselves and the things that we perceived from the artists and from the artworks, but also expressing it in a way um, that was going to be the easiest way for people, for every kind of visitor to understand. And also an important part of this is not imposing our view. So respecting a lot of the ideas that the artists had already expressed in their text or in their conversations that they had with us. Um, but also leaving it open for the visitor's interpretation because art is very subjective anyway. So we can say what we understand as curators, but we also want people to make their own interpretations, to share their own ideas and to find out what they think and what they feel when they see an artwork.
My God, that sounds so difficult to do because you have so many requirements to balance, right? Like you've got obviously the artist and their perspective. You've got the end user, like which is it can be anybody, someone with no artistic literacy whatsoever, to someone who's a researcher, professor type in the art space or an art critic, and then you've got to leave enough room for interpretation. That's wow. That's really interesting. I mean, it's unique in a way too because you have at least four, from what you just said, three or four major criteria in this formula, right? And leaving that space for someone to interpret it. That's interesting. You mentioned imposing your views when you're drafting, when you're writing this information. How how challenging was it? This is a two-part question. I'm going to ask this before I ask the second one. How
Mhm.
challenging was it finding that balance in terms of the dynamic with the artist? Because you read their work, you spoke with them, you got to know them. And how, when you say imposing your views, do you mean imposing your views towards the art and how you interpreted the art, or imposing, like, is it a combination of what the artist mentioned and your own perspective of your own interpretation of the art? Like, elaborate on that, imposing your views. I'm curious to hear more about that, and how you managed to strike a balance.
Yeah, it was challenging in terms of I personally didn't want to say something that had nothing to do with how the artist perceived their artwork or how they created it. So constantly talking with them was what helped in bringing everything together and making sure that um yes, my interpretation was correct, but also, how can I say this? So it's important to communicate what the artist wants to communicate. It's also important what the curator wants to communicate. But I just didn't want to get it wrong, you know? So in reading their thesis papers, in having lots of studio visits or video calls with those who were far away, in drafting the text and then showing the text to the artist and going back and forth, correcting them. It was challenging in the sense of I did sometimes get some details wrong, but not necessarily that my interpretation was completely out of bounds, but that it maybe changed the meaning slightly or considerably. So it was just a matter of assertively communicating with them and respecting both of our voices, but balancing them out.
This is fascinating for me, to be honest. Like I've never, just full disclosure, I've never interviewed an art curator, and I never, So this is a new learning opportunity for me. So hearing you speak about this experience and that this fine line, this dance of trying to ensure that you're representing the artist's point of view, but also as a curator, uh, doing your job is really cool and challenging, and so I'm just really learning a lot from speaking to you. Is I guess is what I'm saying, and I hope people who listen to this, who have no uh, who have no history in this space, may have attended, may have visited exhibits, etc., are probably going to appreciate the role and responsibility curators have, because I mean, it sounds very, very challenging. And for me, by the way, I've dealt with artists, all sorts of artists in different capacities, whatever, and some of them are not necessarily, they're not the easiest people to get along with. I'll just put it that way, and I'm, there's so many different types of arts, and there's so many different types of personalities, and you don't know who you're dealing with on what day, and sometimes it can be challenging, I would imagine. What are the biggest challenges of curating emerging artists, especially when they're still developing their voice and practice?
Well, something that I would like to clarify though is part of how we wanted to market and present this exhibition is precisely to avoid the term of emerging artists, because
Okay.
some of them might be, but a lot of them had already been doing art for many, many decades, because people who study the MFA program come from all walks of life. Some of them are um, in their 60s, in their 70s. Some of them have just finished their BFAs, for example. Some of them come from very different disciplines. So we wanted to avoid this term because I don't know how it's used in Canada specifically, but I have perceived it, at least here in Mexico, that when people use emerging to describe artists, it's in a derogatory way.
Oh, wow.
Because it sounds as though they're just beginning and they're very overlooked here, and they don't get the same opportunities as artists who have a longer trajectory that have been doing art for many years. So at least personally speaking, from my context, from my cultural context, emerging artists are very overlooked here. I It might be the case, but maybe not as intense in Canada, because in living there for years, especially in Ottawa, I found that the artistic community is very welcoming, very united, and they help each other out a lot, and they don't discriminate against artists who are just beginning. Rather, they give them much more opportunities than at least in Mexico, from what I've perceived. Regardless, there were some emerging artists as part of this exhibition, but I don't think it was hard to work with them. Actually, they were all lovely people. They have wonderful ideas. They were very easy to talk to. They were very eager to find different ways to show their artworks and to not just do it in a static way, but rather, again, in a transformative way to show them, to display them. They were very open to describing their ideas in different manners. Again, still balancing out and respecting their original voices. But they were just very happy to put themselves out there, whether they were just beginning or they had been doing it for a long time. So, yeah, we that's why we focused on the fact that however long they've been doing this, they are pushing the boundaries of what contemporary art is. And so putting their ideas out there is what's most important to them and to us in creating this exhibition.
Fascinating, and thank you for clarifying the use of that term there, and how it could be problematic. I was unaware of that, but thank you for that. You mentioned earlier on that you dabbled.
It's not, I do want to jump in because it's not necessarily problematic. It's not a bad term, but how some professionals in the art world still have very elitist views on
Sure.
artists and who can make art use
Very
it this
true.
way.
Yes, yes. No,
That's why we wanted to avoid it, but it's not necessarily a bad term. But yeah.
Mm. No, but I appreciate that we're able to you've highlighted that, and I think it's important to reflect on that. Earlier on, you mentioned that you dabbled your toes in a bit of everything as well in order to put this to put this exhibit on. In particular, you mentioned on the marketing side, and you do you have an arts management background as well, so I'm sure there's a lot on the communications and marketing um, that you've studied, and that you've applied those skills. Speak to us a bit more about that experience on the marketing, and your thoughts on it. And I guess maybe I have a bias because I believe that, like, if you put something on, it needs to be marketed, it needs to be promoted, because let's face it, we're all inundated with so much information out. So sometimes, you know what I mean? It's hard to find out, like, about events, uh, and what to check out. So it's important to communicate, and it's important to market. So speak to us about some of the I guess it's part of being a curator, obviously. Yes, no, maybe you tell us about it. Tell me about it. And yeah, your thoughts on marketing generally.
Yeah. So we did have quite a few meetings with the communications team at the OEG, who is also comprised of very amazing people. In terms of French translation of the ideas that we had previously written, but also how to post it in social media and creating blog posts about it, and how to communicate it to the press so that it could be promoted. It was mostly in terms of the kind of things that we wanted to focus on. Again, for example, avoiding this idea of emerging artists, but focusing on the whole innovative focus and boundary skipping process of creating art. We wanted to make the artists part of this process as well. So coming up with ideas for recording small videos of the artists talking about their works, the ideas behind them, things that people could easily be hooked by and engage with, so that it grabs their attention and it makes them want to come visit the exhibition. We also created a public program of activities, such as artist talks, and we also wrote a tour guide, so that when people want someone to guide them through the exhibition, the team that takes care of that at BOAG has guidelines to go deeper into the ideas behind the works. And so yeah, it was mostly about how to put it out there. It's important to promote it, certainly. I know that some of it, like the idea behind marketing, sometimes it's a little abusive in terms of bombarding people with information, but we tried to do it in a way that was that grabs people's attention and invites them in, rather than convincing them. It has to be more inviting rather than convincing, rather than bombarding them with stuff.
What would you say is an example of a tough curatorial call you had to make, you and your partner or someone else? Is there an example of a situation where you guys had to individually or collectively make a tough call? If it's about the marketing, if it's about a particular artist and their work, or can you tell us a little bit about such situation, if there were any?
I think the tough calls were maybe having to omit some of the artworks that we had as an option to choose to include, because even though they were very representative of the artists and their practice, it didn't necessarily fit into the ideas that we were working with when conceptualizing the themes for the exhibition. I mean, gorgeous works and intricate things behind them, but it was mostly they didn't fit because they would be maybe a little out of context. Of course, we wanted to showcase everything that these artists made, but it was also quite a large group. It's the largest gallery at the OAG, but still we couldn't fit everything. So it was mostly in terms of space and also in terms of technical things that we had to resolve. For example, and still we have a lot of audio and video pieces, so there were also tough calls to make in terms of, this video is gonna have to have headphones and you're gonna have to get close to this one to listen to it, because if everything is playing at the same time, there's gonna be a lot of sound bleeds and interventions, and you're not gonna be able to appreciate everything as it should be, because it's going to be maybe a lot of noise at the same time. So technically speaking, there were a lot of tough calls we had to make as well on how to install certain pieces and how to display them. But again, the installation team at the OEG are geniuses, and they helped us solve a lot of these issues. And I think we managed to show the pieces the best way possible without them interfering with each other, and rather showcasing them in the most beautiful way possible.
What in terms of behind the scene. Actually, before I ask you this question, what's some of the feedback you've gotten from the public and the artists and friends, etc.? Like, what sort of feedback have you gotten in regards to the exhibit?
So far, luckily, we've gotten all positive feedback. The artists were very happy in terms of how we installed their artwork. Some of them intervened in the installation process. They were present there and they helped the team. Some of them remotely gave us instructions and we put it together. But they were all really happy with the decisions that we took, because in some cases we made slight changes in how to install their works, but without changing the meaning or without affecting the look of things too much. But we did have to make decisions that made it some things easier to put up, or that wouldn't again interfere with other works. But they were really happy about how it all turned out. The public, I think we've we've had a lot of visitors and they've all liked it a lot, and they've said that it was not hard to understand, which fills my heart, because again it's an important part of my curatorial practice, is again to make art accessible to everyone and easier to understand than how it's being. My friends from there have also given me really nice compliments, and given the gallery really nice compliments on the exhibition. I think it's had a wonderful response so far.
As it should. It's I know I'm interviewing you, but as I mentioned, I've been there numerous times, and I'm completely impressed by the space, the energy it has, the presence, and I interviewed two artists in regards to their work, and just this. It's and I've mentioned it to friends and colleagues, etc., kind of encouraging them to check it out. And I don't know if this is just me, but I feel you need to visit exhibits. I could say the same about plays, by the way. You need to watch them more than once, ideally with exhibits, or in my opinion, you need to go obviously more than once to really understand or quote unquote experience and feel what you need to feel. I don't know what your opinions on that are, but or how common that is, but you know how sometimes people will only watch a film once, or a documentary film, and then a nonfiction or fiction, they'll watch it once and they kind of have made up their minds on it. I'm of the opinion you need to watch it at least 2-3 times. And I know we don't have time for that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you kind of, because you can miss out on things, or in the case of exhibits, it's more the overall, as I mentioned, it's like you're teleported to a different world, with 11 different perspectives on transformation and becoming. What's, in terms of behind the scene work that takes the most time, like things that visitors don't realize a curator is doing? Can you tell us what some of those things are? Because you kind of mentioned it already, actually, but you guys you have so many duties and responsibilities, right? There's a lot going on. You got to deal with this, that, and the other. Can you kind of run us through some of those behind the scenes tasks that need to be done for an exhibit?
Yeah. I'm gonna start by the end of things, because it looks like the installation is done very quickly, because it normally takes I don't know, 2 to 3 weeks to put everything up. Which might sound like it's quick, but there's a ton of decisions that have to be made months in advance. So even though in terms of rushing things like painting the walls and leaving them to dry and then putting up the works, it's all really quickly, but it all depends on first the conceptualization of the exhibition. So it's first choosing the artworks, but also finding ideas and concepts that connect them. And then the layout takes months to plan, and it undergoes thousands of changes. I had to change the layout many times. Every week we had a meeting because we found that some works looked better in other spaces, or that we created like little notes that were a little more intimate and let the audience see or listen to something that needs to be like more closely appreciated. So it does take a longer time than one might think. It At the end, everything is rushed because the decisions have all fallen in place. But still, during the installation process, things can change, and people need to be quick on their feet and make different decisions than originally taken. But I mean, and we were given a year, and sometimes exhibitions are not planned just throughout a year, but even years in advance. Sometimes it is in just months or weeks.
Wow.
Um,
Weeks, eh?
So it depends. Yeah, I have been part of exhibitions that have been planned in weeks. Obviously, much more simple, but still, there's a lot of things to take into account. So it's a lot of hard work. Even though it seems rushed at times, there's a lot of things that we have to do in order for an exhibition to come to realization.
Fascinating. There's aspects of event management, project management, almost interior decoration when you speak of space. Pardon me to compare it to that. I know it's not the same thing, but in terms of spacing and layout and
No, it's
you
hard.
know, yeah, and it has such, I think, you know, how you talk about creating space for like a nook and cranny. I don't know if you use that expression for certain pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that to me,
Yeah.
that was really, because I know what you may be referring to, and I think for certain pieces it really added another, like, I've overused the expression teleportation, but it really created another, you know what I mean? It created another chamber of experiences that almost augmented what was happening to the viewer,
Yeah.
stepped into that space. And there's a couple of those, actually, and if you go and you actually give the space time, you might feel it. So it's really cool that I'm sure it was a pain to have to kind of redesign as to, okay, what goes where, but I think the intent there is certainly worth it, because it as someone who's experiencing all the art, or trying to understand the art, or absorbing it, etc., I think it may mean something to them. It will, you know what I mean? Because they're traveling through this landscape of emotions and perspectives. Last question for you, or two more actually, if you don't mind. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what are you most proud of in regards to this exhibit? Having, putting it together and so on. Well, what are you most proud of, and what did you learn the most as a curator from this experience?
So what I'm most proud of is to have been given the chance to put myself out there as a curator. I will use the emerging term for me. I am an emerging curator. I'm just starting out, but um, being able to put up an exhibition in a um in a I lost the word for it, but as a central piece, a protagonist role. It's the first time I've done it. I have assisted in exhibitions before, but this was the first time that my name is up there as curator, as main curator, co-curator in this case. So I'm quite proud to do it for the first time in such an important institution as is the Ottawa Art Gallery, because it's a central place for the artistic community of not only Ottawa but Canada. A lot of great artists have exhibited there, so having my name up there with those great artists and great curators is definitely a foundational stone in my career, and I will always look back as one of the most amazing experiences, professionally and personally speaking. And what did I learn the most? That I would say that all the small tasks are important and they should not be overlooked, because it makes the big tasks come together and it makes everything possible. So I've always been good at time management and organization, but keeping a good attitude even towards the dull small tasks is very important, because it helps with stress management as well. It is a stressful job, honestly, especially because there's some things that are complicated in terms of putting things up and making important decisions without affecting the I don't know, the feelings of people involved. But yeah, definitely having a positive outlook on doing all the dull little things is gonna make the big work worth it in the end. And it definitely was. It was lovely to work with all of the people that I worked with. The artists are amazing. The team at the OAG were very helpful and always very open to supervising, but also, again, without imposing, giving us a lot of creative liberty, always in a guiding position. So yeah, I'm quite proud of that too, and it was all worth it in the end.
That's very cool. That's yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations. And how did you document the journey on the personal side? Did you have a journal? Did you capture any yeah, how did you do any personal documentation that's not intended for maybe it's intended for external audiences or not? How did you do anything like that, like a diary or?
Yeah, don't necessarily have a personal diary, but I did. I do have like a digital archive of things that I wrote, and even like administrative stuff that I kept. Because it's gonna be helpful in my career to use the good examples and even the things, the mistakes that I made, to not make them again. This archive is definitely gonna be helpful in terms of that. I took tons of pictures. I recorded meetings.
Nice.
Of course, they sent me the official documentation pictures in high resolution. I immediately saved them in a hard drive. I also have I saved emails that I wrote to the artists. I pretty much kept everything, because I mean, being such a big professional experience, it's definitely gonna, I wanted to shape up what the next steps in my career that I take are gonna be. So it's I think a great example that I can keep following in upcoming projects.
Very cool. Speaking of upcoming projects, if you don't mind me asking, what's your next project? Are you what are you looking for? What's happening on that front?
I just helped in terms of, I was an assistant curator in an exhibition that just opened in November at the Garmamie Gallery there in City Hall, Ottawa. that is called And I Have Come Upon This Place by Lost Ways. It's curated by Remco Wolmer from Art Engine. I just finished working with him. I helped him with project management in some curatorial decisions, and it's also a lovely exhibition that if you could go visit and promote, I would be thankful, because it also has an amazing group of artists there. It's about diverse futurologies, diverse perspectives of what the future can look like.
Interesting. At the Karsh.
It's at City Hall at Karsh Masson Gallery.
Okay.
And it's called, it's a long title. It's And I Have Come Upon This Place by Lost Ways.
Yeah, you guys come up with the best titles. Holy moly. Like that's you know what I mean? I love it. It's I'll definitely check it out, and who knows, maybe I'll do another set of interviews on this, because this is all very interesting. Elisa, thank you very much for your time, and keep me posted on future projects. Yeah, this has been incredible. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you too. It was really nice to talk to you, and thanks again for this opportunity.
That was curator Elisa Jiménez Robles in conversation with Strictly Creative's host, Garmamie. To complete the set, go back and listen to the 2 separate artist interviews with Leigha Stiles and Armand Diansambu. They're 2 of the 11 artists featured in Endless Becomings, and those episodes bring the work to life from the artist's side. Available wherever you get your podcasts. And for the quick hits, check out the YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels posted on Strictly Creative. Most importantly, Endless Becomings is on at the Ottawa Art Gallery in downtown Ottawa until March 15th, 2026. So don't sleep on it. Hurry up and go see it while it's still up.